Ryan, it's so good to see you. Back in person.
In person.
Yeah. I think last time we did it over the internet because winter and schedules and storms derailed us.
Yeah, we had that day planned and then it snowed and threw everything up.
So even this episode is, which should have come out at the beginning of the month, is now in week 3 of the month. But that's okay. Folks at home can wait just a few extra weeks. It's fine.
You've got another episode to replace this one, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
One of Rick's.
Yeah. But we could have said, or we could have done another virtual episode to meet schedule, but we did promise the ladies and gentlemen that the next episode would be back in person, and this is always better anyway. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the conversation is better and company is better, and
I'm not messing around on Facebook the entire time that we're talking.
Exactly, just completely ignoring each other.
Yeah.
Let's dive right back in, shall we? We have a series that we've done over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite ship type. So I think that when I was here in October, we did carriers last.
Yeah, that's the most
recent. And then Drac sat in for the last couple of minutes, and that was some good fun.
Where did he even come from?
He just materializes. He's like a myth, and then he shows up, and then you realize that he's real.
We've already said his name once. We cannot say it 2 more times. Exactly. He'll show up.
Exactly.
We're going to have to start referring to him as the English gentleman or something like that.
So we've done destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and carriers.
Mm-hmm.
The next logical class would then be, what's our favorite submarine?
It's Narwhal.
Okay. But we're going to continue to ignore submarines because I'm the average World of Warships player and I can't deal. Okay. So let's just say a Balau or a Gato class ship of some variety, boat, not ship, and then we'll just let it off. What's your favorite? Like Nautilus? I don't know. You said Narwhal.
Yeah, one of the 6-inch armed cruiser submarines. Those are pretty cool.
Nautilus,
But yeah, no. As a battleship guy,
right.
I do not believe aircraft carriers or submarines exist.
Yeah, so we're going to continue to ignore submarines, and we'll get there eventually. But because this is because all you people at home seem to love nothing but battleships, we're gonna go back to battleships.
Second favorite?
No. So battleship. The favorite battleship episode was the one we did the longest ago. So it's only, I think, right that we circle back. We're gonna do least favorite battleships.
Oh.
Because believe it or not, most of them do suck.
I really hate Missouri, that overglorified desk. Can you believe that they get like 10 times more visitation than we do?
Fucking Truman. Okay, Ryan.
I still can't believe that Missouri has a donut shop. Like, what?
Okay. When was the last time you were at... You're good? Okay. You're going to say Missouri the entire episode? Okay. And I'm going to say Missouri the entire episode. And we'll just have to agree to disagree.
I don't hear a difference.
Okay. Fine. Did you want to get out your Missouri venting before we dive into the topic?
No, it'll have to come up naturally throughout.
That's fair. When was the last time you were there?
It would have been the HINSA conference.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Was that 22?
Yeah, 22. Yeah. Between Mobile and Albany.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So 22. Okay. I was there in 2005 as a child, so it's been a while.
Prior to 22, I think 08.
Yeah.
As a kid was my first time visiting.
Right. So it's been a long time. I was so young that I really wasn't taking in the ship as a like with the lens that I would do it today. So yeah. I don't think my opinions, I don't really want to share anything.
We were working on our deck. They'd already finished theirs. Mm-hmm. We were working on getting into dry dock.
They had already been. And they went to a Navy yard too. They got the Navy treatment, unlike you.
and now they're painting their or they have finished painting their superstructure, and we're still working on getting to that step. I hate that shit.
But you still have all your doorknobs and and fittings and things. People haven't like taken wrenches to your pipes. And
that is the positive thing
stuff
about having 10 times less visitation and not being the surrender ship is people have probably taken fewer souvenirs from us.
Right. Okay. But I don't think either one of us is saying Missouri is our answer for this question as far as least favorite battleships.
Yeah, no, definitely not. New Jersey should have been the surrender ship. Darn it.
I know, exactly. Fucking Truman.
If Roosevelt hadn't died.
For the second time this episode. Well, yeah. I'm still waiting for the day where Rick does his just completely destroys Truman with all his anti-Navy stuff. Anyway, so would you like to present a real thought or a real answer? Or so we were just having this conversation about famous battleships that have really been junk, but they were famous because they sank. You know, and like the Bismarcks of the world, the Yamatos of the world, and I mean, really powerful ships, you know, but they obviously had their own problems. And then of course, like Arizona. Okay, I'm not saying. I mean, those ships were old, you know. And,
Arizona was old and obsolete. If it hadn't been for the various naval treaties like artificially keeping them around, then she wouldn't have been in Pearl Harbor.
And even if Arizona doesn't get destroyed at Pearl Harbor, like Pennsylvania, not a whole lot going on. You know, like 404 era, you know, career not sort of found. You know, that kind of deal. So okay, so Ryan. Do you have a least favorite battleship for real reasons? Not that Missouri has a donut shop and your beloved New Jersey was punted from the surrender.
I think those are legitimate reasons, and you're not hearing me properly.
So I'm not hearing you. Okay, you want to discuss these feelings?
I think you're going to get even more upset by this. So it's a little Kriegsmarine ship that you might have heard of by the name of Bismarck.
You just have to go right for the heart. Okay, what's wrong with the beloved Iron Chancellor?
So he is a decently designed ship.
Yeah,
not a perfect design ship, but pretty good, pretty modern. That was not the ship that Germany needed to build.
No, dictators love battleships.
Yeah,
you're right.
And Hitler built some battleships that were close to what he needed in Scharnhorst and Gneisenau that were effective commerce raiders, and they were even used as such fairly effectively. And then they were even effective deterrents. At least Scharnhorst was. Gneisenau was an effective breakwater at this time. But I feel like Scharnhorst causes just as much consternation to the British as Tirpitz when she's in Norway. Significantly less investment in resources. An earlier investment in resources, so it's not being built in wartime. And a more effective commerce raider. Bismarck was not the ship that the German Navy needed during World War II. She's a complete break with their doctrine. And then their doctrine doesn't really support her. We had, was it him? Excuse me. Was it? What is a battleship or what is a cruiser? We on a bunch of episodes we have discussed the German naval doctrine leading through the interwar and into World War II, and a ship the size of Bismarck does not fit that doctrine. It's just a complete departure in the same way that Graf Zeppelin was not either. You have a gigantic fleet carrier that would have required U.S. sort of fleet or Japanese tactics to surround it. But then but you get in all these 6-inch guns and it's so... and you don't have the destroyers and cruisers that can actually escort it long range or provide anti-aircraft defense. So there's a ship that, while okay, country didn't need, and ultimately too expensive, and it's just an ego project.
Yeah, so if Bismarck had been built by France or Great Britain, which, Vanguard, very similar characteristics to Bismarck. Richelieu, very similar characteristics to Bismarck. Richelieu is a better Bismarck. It's a less resource intensive, but equally as powerful ship. Same speed, same firepower, pretty effective armor scheme, but for an innovative way and not a brute force. We're just going to add an extra 10,000 tons of steel to this thing.
These are bold claims. Let's see if it works out for you. We just did an episode on Richelieu, on that ship.
I love that episode. I learned some stuff from Rick that I'd never heard before.
Yeah, so maybe go back and watch that. It's interesting. The U.S. Navy's, their sort of reluctance to finish those French battleships, knowing that, okay, we'll do the U.S. approach thing. We'll slap a bunch of 40s and 20s on it, but it's still a, odd man out kind of deal.
We're all tooled up for freedom units, and then we're like, how do we fix these 2 damaged 15-inch gun barrels? Like, everything's on this base 100 system that makes absolutely no sense to anybody.
And then even a slight reline to accommodate British shells.
Exactly.
Because it's like, well, okay, we as a country made the leap to 406. And then, of course, there's still a few ships running around with 14-inch guns. But 16 has become the standard, the World War II American standard. Would you not agree? I mean, all these ships, and even like the Colorados and West Virginia, that kind of deal. So 406 being, I think, the dominant, whereas a lot of the European ships stuck with the 15. They were stuck at that 15-inch sort of caliber, that without making that final leap. Obviously, the British, had Rodney and that class with 16-inch guns, and then the Germans were working on their the H-39. That the immediate replacement to Bismarck and Tirpitz were all just slightly bigger, and then would go to 16-inch guns. And
which, in my defense, if they had been built, then I would probably be saying that those were my least favorite, and instead of your beloved
crappy diesel. You're like, okay.
But at least, like, diesel makes sense.
My beloved Bismarck, the internet's beloved Bismarck.
You are the personification of the internet here that I'm talking to.
Okay. Yeah, just wait till you come to my house for the first time. I just got a brand new framed blueprint line drawing of Bismarck that hangs above my Bismarck ship model. It's very good.
Some of the ones that the floating dry dock sells, or where'd you find it?
At an estate sale somewhere.
Oh, nice.
I'm not crazy.
But I have a nice Lexington class battle cruiser framed in my library that I think came off a floating dry dock.
Yeah. Okay. So you've offended all the Kriegaboos on the internet. Okay. I'm going to agree with you. This isn't my pick. I'm just agreeing with you
to end this conversation and move on.
Well, no, I think that there's a lot of real reasons why people like that ship. I think we've discussed the idea that ship took a lot of damage and actually sort of came through that damage. Obviously, he still gets sunk.
He's a good-looking ship.
Yeah.
It's a really compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ballard finding him is an equally as compelling story.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've held a piece of Bismarck shell fragment from that was collected off the deck of Prince of Wales. So that was interesting. That Bill Garsky has in his personal collection. So there's a bit of, there's a little bit of a connection there to be able to hold something that was fired from that ship, which is interesting. But all that aside, I think if Drac Inafel, which is the second time we're saying his name,
the British gentleman.
If the British gentleman was here, he would immediately bring up the lack of reserve buoyancy.
And he's done a tremendous amount of research into Bismarck's design that has really called into question a lot of things that about the quality of said design.
Yeah, my buoyancy. So, he always gets so triggered over that fact. You know, it's like my reserve buoyancy, piece of junk. So, okay. So I will say I'll give you that. Also, the German, that tonnage for only 8 barrels versus 9. You know, the additional weight of the 4th turret. There's just a lot of, and then
the mixed secondary battery.
I was just gonna say that the mixed secondary battery, which of course just adds weight, but then nerfs the gun power. You know, so now you're the guns that are really doing a lot of the work, the 4.1s, 105s.
4.1.
105s. The guns that are doing...
In my house, we use Freedom units.
Freedom units. So, okay. So, Freedom units. So what's 37 millimeter in Freedom units?
1.5 inches.
Okay. So, but European battleships, and a lot of European battleships,
Mhm.
you know, and even the Yamato class, or Japanese battleships in general, had a lot of that mixed secondary.
Yeah.
So it's not really Germany's fault, and it's not really Bismarck's fault. I just think that that's an interesting trait that a lot of those battleships ended up with. The mixed secondary with the 6-inch guns, and then some sort of lighter intermediate, less sub 5-inch gun, and then a bunch of lighter caliber stuff.
Yeah, nobody else developed a gun as effective as the 5-inch 38. So, like the British 5.25.
What's that in Freedom units?
5.25, yeah.
What's that in commie units? Whatever it is. 160s.
127 plus
70.
12. Roughly 6. So, like 133, something like that.
That would make sense, because the Russians love that 130 millimeter calibers. Never mind.
But it was too heavy to be rapidly fired.
Yeah.
Their 4.5 was too light to be ineffective.
Right.
The Japanese hit on a really great anti-aircraft weapon with their 100 millimeter gun at the end of the war. But again, it's kind of light for the anti-surface stuff. And I find it hard to believe that there's a universe where Yamato would be built with that without an intermediate 6-inch battery.
Well, no, but even
battery, because they have so little anti-destroyer armament at that point.
But the Shinano, like, potential late war Battleship 3-4 design, you still have the super firing 6-inch guns.
Yeah, because that 18-inch gun is so slow to train and fire that it's not effective at close range torpedo attacks.
Yeah.
The German 15-inch doesn't really fall into that, especially the 11 inches of the pocket battleships and Scharnhorst and Gneisenau don't fall into that. They could have probably gotten away with just the 4.1s.
Versus still mounting the 6-inch guns on the Scharnhorst. Yeah. Bismarck, you could take it or leave it.
There's an argument to be made. I think it's wrong, but there's an argument to be made. And then it definitely becomes a more coherent argument when you get to Yamato with those 18.1-inch guns.
So you would pick Bismarck even over Yamato for least favorite battleship?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does Yamato just do it for you? Slightly better? I
mean, New Jersey needs a bad guy. You always need an aggressor to beat up on.
But you don't think like New Jersey, given Tirpitz the business, would be like more fun because you predict like less damage to New Jersey in that fight?
We're Americans. We love a good underdog story. John McClane killing all the terrorists in Nakahama Tower. Like, we don't want to club baby seals like fighting Tirpitz. We want something bigger and badder than us that we can eventually beat through sheer American investment in radar. So
you're not the guy complaining in chat about constantly being up-tiered when you play World Warships, you know? So when you're like, oh man, here I am in my tier 9 Iowa, I'm going to beat up on some tier 7 Scharnhorst today. And then it's like, oh, here's Yamato and a bunch of tier 11 super ships, and you're like, nah, it's fine. I'm good.
Hide behind the island. You got those high angle shells.
Yeah, just a little plunging fire. Punch through those, you know, especially those German battleships. They don't need, what's deck armor? Yeah, another reason why we don't like it.
Okay. I guess since you said what your least favorite non-American, because guess what? You still have to pick a least favorite American battleship.
I thought I was already very clear about that.
Oh, so that was your official answer? Be careful. You're very political in nature in terms of what you do for a living. People from the Pearl Harbor Museum might actually see this. Then again, no, they won't.
I'm picturing Frank Clay, my counterpart on Missouri, sending hitmen after me.
Exactly. Because the visitation, they probably have the budget to do that. Hire third-party help to come put the hit on you.
Huh.
All those donut shop profits, man. They probably got the. I'm expecting them to knock on the door any minute. Okay. While you take time to decide how your fate's going to be sealed, I'll give you my least favorite European, or not European,
un-American.
Un-American. In this case, it is European. It's got to be the KGVs. The King George V class battleships are just, to me, it was like, you should have realized that these weren't that great. Even when you were told they weren't that great, you still went through and you built way too many of them.
5.
And then obviously they have careers, they have records, Prince of Wales, Duke of York,
Prince of Wales has the shortest record of any British battleship ever.
Okay. No, Anson, Al, but I know probably people are going to freak out. People already think that we hate all British Royal Navy stuff on this channel in general. But I just don't like those ships. I don't like the quad 14-inch turrets. I think those were executed poorly when compared to the French quad 15s.
And I don't think I would be upset by them if they had enough barrels. Mm-hmm. If they went with straight, here's 3 quad turrets, we're doing 12 guns, which is probably about equivalent to the 9 16-inch guns that other nations are building.
You have talked about their poor power generation.
Yeah, they had no life after World War II because they used all steam motors for things. They did not make enough electricity for post-war radars and stuff to be retrofitted.
And then, turrets, bad. I would say just average records and life. Again, Duke of York, there's always going to be outliers.
They pioneer angled armored belts, and then they go back to slab horizontal belts for these ships.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say, I don't think the armor is anything to write home about. So I think they're a class full of compromises for treaty purposes, obviously,
which all Allied battleships are.
Yes, but this would be like the United States ordering and building 6 North Carolina class ships and then working out the bugs by 1945. Whereas, we were like, okay, well, let's do this, and then, oh, guess what? Here's some more. I think that had the Great Britain, now granted, the economic situation is different in Britain, what they endured at the beginning of the war versus us, whereas we had the extra 3 years. They didn't.
Yeah.
They got to start building tanks and planes, cranking out Spitfires like there's no tomorrow. We don't need these battleships that are just big targets for German submarines and such. But I feel like given all of that, you can say, okay, quickly switch over and then produced a Lion class or 2, sort of, so that
maybe build 2 or 3 King Georges and then start building the Lions.
Right. So you get at the end of the day, you get 2 or 3 Lion, or 1, 2, or 3 Lions, which is a traditional sort of design that is, I think, more contemporary to like what we're talking about as far as World War II and post-war. Instead, you get a bunch of gimped KGVs, and then you get this like greatest hits bastard version of a British battleship in Vanguard, where it's just
which would have been better
if we tried. Look how pretty it is painted white. I don't.
They should have probably put more resources into Vanguard instead of Anson and Howe and gotten her out earlier because of that speed.
Mm-hmm.
That's
another thing where the
another
King George
component,
F's fall flat is they just don't have that speed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same speed as North Carolina's and South Dakota's. That's fair. But then we also were building the Iowas to have that speed.
And that speed is the reason why the North Carolinas and the South Dakotas don't stick around. So it's completely understandable that those ships aren't retained and they're all scrapped, even though they're all relatively new, but I just don't think their firepower, their main battery fire, obviously the 5.2 and as being a decent secondary weapon, but anti-aircraft is, I'd say, pretty typical. The British had the pom-poms and other allied weapons and such. But yeah, I just don't care for those ships. I never have, and quite frankly, I don't think I ever will. And there's people murdering me in the comments right now. They're like, "Oh man, you guys, I knew you hated Royal Navy ships. I'm unsubscribing. Worst channel ever."
They don't look good either.
No,
with
they don't.
The flat bow so they can fire 0 degrees
They don't.
forward,
No,
and the Queen Anne's Mansion superstructure.
No,
like Vanguard hits on a good design for that.
She's pretty.
The G3s and N3s don't look bad with their Queen Anne's Mansions, but the Nelrods and the King George V's,
mm-hmm. No, they just don't look that
and
great.
the Queen Elizabeths that get their refit.
Yeah, exactly. Even like like you said, the ones that do get the refit, like Vanguard. Vanguard has the history and the service career, and to back up, especially a ship that old too. But yeah, not the KGVs, and they look like the battleship version of like Cromwell tanks and stuff like that. I mean, these like turret faces, these just like flat turret faces, and all these like joints and angles and all this stuff, and I'm like, hit that with a battleship shell.
Yeah, there's a part of battleship design that should not be practical because these are ships of state and they're supposed to look good and imposing. Mm-hmm. And the United States hits on that with the Iowa class. The Germans hit on that with the Bismarck class. The Japanese hit on that with the Yamato class.
I would go slightly further and say even the South Dakota class battleships are a little dumpy, but they still look okay. But I think the North Carolina class battleships are good looking ships.
They've got a good length to beam ratio. Yeah.
And for a country that hadn't built battleships in a long time, I think we did a pretty good job. But no, it's just KGV.
Yeah, especially comparing like KGVs to the North Carolinas, that they're contemporary.
Yes, right.
The North Carolinas are able to switch over to the 60-inch guns. The KGVs are not. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because the United States is able to build the North Carolinas in 3 years instead of 4, like everybody else is building their battleships in, so they could afford to wait longer.
Yes.
And ours still come out a year later than the King George V's are in service.
Well, like I said, our World War II did not start in September of 39. Yeah. So obviously, it's hard to really talk about this kind of stuff without that idea that, okay, we had extra time and we could learn and we could see what was going on, and just knowing that, this a quad, like you've seen those designs, right? Of North Carolina with like the three, with the three.
I like the single funnel. I like that part of the design. Having mixed single and twin 5-inch guns, having the quad turrets, it makes the ship look much less balanced.
Yeah, I don't like the designs that do the mixed single twin, single and twin 5-inch mounts. Those it just looks weird. But I kind of understand.
With the treaty restrictions.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
It's also worth pointing out that the North Carolinas and the King George V's have fairly equivalent teething problems as the first new battleships built in close to 20 years.
Well, I mean, right. And so that's kind of my point again, where it's think about all the work that had to go into North Carolina when she was working up, but then having to do that under wartime, like scenarios
where you have to get these ships out before they're completed, a la Prince of Wales.
Yeah,
to have enough battleships.
I'm fighting Bismarck, and they're trying to fix the turrets, like, and finish stuff.
I think it's telling that you're not dinging them for their teething problems, because
and again, this list is just for fun anyway.
Yeah.
This is just, again, this is an opinion piece. We're just having fun with it. I'm not trying to trash Prince of Wales or Duke of York or KGB or any of those ships that, or the sailors that went on them. So please stop trashing us in the comments. Por favor. Okay. So we've got the foreign battleships out of the way. Do you want to tackle least favorite U.S. battleships, or are you sticking with Missouri, or do you have a real answer?
So the one that immediately comes to mind for me, and I'm not sure if it should count or not, because we're specifically talking about dreadnought type battleships and on. We've been very specifically focusing on World War II era with Bismarck and King George V.
Yeah, fair.
So it feels wrong to say South Carolina and Michigan are America's first class of all big gun capital ship.
Well, so many countries were doing things differently.
Yeah.
Obviously you have the traditional sort of dreadnought design, but there's still a lot of learning to be done in those really early dreadnought ships.
And the main reason why I'm not sure if I should count them or not,
because I personally wouldn't.
I would. There's an argument to be made that they are semi-dreadnoughts. They are not full dreadnoughts. They are laid down, I believe, before Dreadnought herself. The designs, at least, are made before Dreadnought herself becomes known. So while they do some cool things like super-firing turrets,
America first Dreadnought battleship.
No,
okay.
The Dreadnought everybody retains about the same armor scheme at this point, but Dreadnought switched to the all 12-inch battery, and more importantly, the turbines for that higher speed. The South Carolinas still have the triple reciprocating engines of earlier pre-Dreadnought battleships, so they're still the 18 knots of the pre-Dreadnought battleships. They can't sail with the Dreadnought line, which does 21 knots.
Sure.
So that precludes them from taking advantage of all the Dreadnought innovations. And again, that's not known in America at the time until Dreadnought comes out and we realize that she is so much faster and everything else.
So is Texas your least favorite battleship because of steam, expansion style steam engines? No. We said we were excluding museum ships. Travis, don't.
That whole series of the Wyomings, the New Yorks, and the Nevadas are where I'm falling if we're going to say that South Carolina really shouldn't count.
Okay, so we're on the same page because I'm going to say the same thing.
Okay.
And maybe even just slightly further up the line.
Okay.
I'm just going to lump all the standard class battleships in together. I do not like American standard class battleships. I'm like, and I'm going to get so canceled on the internet when I said that.
Well, by me, I'm unsubscribing after you say that.
Okay, well, good. I think that they were, they showed the evolution of sort of the American battleship. But because of the treaties, they were sort of kept along. Some of them were kept along way too long.
Yeah.
And then the refits in the interwar period made them worse, not better. They were made in some instances, the ranges got better, but every single time they added something, they got slower. And ships that were already painfully slow, ships that just absolutely sucked gas like a 70s Cadillac.
Which is what prevents them from being deployed like Guadalcanal or any of these places. Yeah.
And ultimately, the ones that then survived Pearl Harbor, they get refit, they get all this time and attention and steel and everything because, it's easier to rebuild West Virginia than it is build a 6 Iowa class battleship, even though you already did almost, or Montana, whatever. Okay, fine, send them out there, but now they're like floating ovals, and they're even slower than they were pre-war. It's like,
and they're still 20-year-old ships, so they're not up to modern standards.
It's just the struggle bus, I love calling Colorado and World of Warships struggle bus. It's just like, holy Lord, you play these things and you're just like, go. You're like willing it. It's like, oh man, I'm doing 15 knots. Oh, hard over. Great. Now I'm doing 9, and you're like, holy Lord.
I just want to get into range of something.
I just want to range something. Oh yeah, and then okay, so I fired. Great, I missed. Oh, I've got machinery that's 30 years old. Oh, my reload time is abysmal.
Oh no, because I wasn't there. This whole wing has collapsed, and now I have to turn around and retreat or get shot up.
And now my whole superstructure is on fire. Everything is fine. No, it's not. It's just terrible. And then especially the refit ones where they glue on the torpedo protection and then stick the 5-inch mounts on top of the torpedo protection. And I mentioned this in an episode we did a couple months ago where it's like, okay, the mount for the 5-inch gun is like literally the slab side of the ship. I'm going to take one 5-inch shell and it's going to knock out that entire handling space.
And potentially cause secondary detonations.
Yeah. I just, oh man, I just couldn't help but feel that you probably could have used that steel elsewhere.
Which is how I feel about Bismarck.
Okay. So, right. How many more, especially, as you're struggling for cruisers in the early war period, and especially as you need to get light cruisers and heavy cruisers and destroyers built, and you're struggling, you need to put Essex class hulls in the water, and you're down to Enterprise, it's out there like solo, YOLOing around the Pacific, like
with an elevator down,
so, and it's like, I don't need a bunch of slow battleships and even later in the war you say, well, because the heavy cruisers, the Iowa class battleships, and even like the North Carolinas and South Dakotas obviously did their role at protecting carrier groups and such. But even like Enterprise is walking away from North Carolina, and luckily the anti-aircraft guns have range and such. But it's just, and really only when you get to like the Iowas and Alaska do you have like a gigantic capital ship that can keep pace with the carriers. But so you got shore bombardment duty.
I can't wait to talk about how important Alaska and the Iowas were or weren't in that upcoming video.
So in one of the next upcoming episodes, we're going to touch on that one. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to catch so much shit for this. Like the keyboard warriors are setting the internet on fire right now, roasting me. But I don't like any of those ships. So they don't look good. They just, whatever. I have always said, now, again, this has nothing to do with the men who served on board them, the story, the history. Okay. No one is just trying to disrespect any of it.
We're just a couple of autistic people talking about big machines here.
Yes.
We're not talking about...
Yes, this is my TISM, okay? And I'm going to earn my TISM token today, okay? Japan did us a favor at Pearl Harbor by neutering those battleships
and forcing us to go to carriers
and forcing that hand, right? They sank themselves. Because if they had done anything else, right, we would have sailed those ancient heaps out
into the Japanese mandate,
into the Japanese doctrine. They would have been long lanced to hell, and then they would have all been on the bottom of the Pacific. And,
unrecoverable.
And everyone would have died.
Yeah.
And they would have all been unrecoverable, like you said. So, like...
I am so of two minds with this.
Ryan's like, we are not friends anymore. Get off my battleship.
You make some good points, and some points that tie into why I was choosing one of the ships in that 3-class series I was talking about. I like the standard class, that they're all using about the same stuff, and they're all about the same capabilities. Standard. So, like, we have a homogenous battle line, especially when they're built. And they do great service in World War II as second-line battleships. That being used as siege engines that are rendering these islands like blockaded, and they will fall eventually because of this.
It's a powered barge that's pushing around a large caliber weapon.
And you cannot break that siege unless the Japanese come out with equal or greater power of their own ships. And they never managed to do that.
Okay, but like Iwo Jima, okay? I mean, like how many tons of munitions can you put into the side of a mountain before you got to go and send a bunch of Marines into some holes to clear, to flamethrower out some caves, to capture an island that could be an airfield, but then you don't really need it in the end.
Yeah, we're talking about late war where Japanese tactics have grown to accommodate this massive bombardment that they're receiving.
Right.
But yeah, I like that they are so homogenous and there's a slight improvement from one to the other. But at the same time, it's infuriating. And that's why I was picking one of the ships in the Wyoming, New York, or Nevada
that makes sense,
series, because like we had the 14-inch gun and we built the Wyomings instead. The Wyomings are not homogenous to the earlier 12-inch armed battleships. They have a longer caliber gun. We've developed a whole new gun for them.
It's nice.
But we already had the 14-inch gun, and we ended up going to that in the next class anyway. So like that class was so useless. Well, and useless in terms of design.
The one thing that
progress
really, and so since you brought this up, I really wish Arkansas and Wyoming just didn't exist, because the fact that those are still around in World War II is the one shred that people use, right, to claim that Alaska is a battle cruiser. Those just bleeping Arkansas and the 12 inches is a battleship caliber weapon in World War II. Fucking no, it's not. Okay. I mean, the Navy redesignates BBO, old battleship. Okay. It's even the Navy goes, we can't even call this a BB anymore. It is such a heap of dog shit. And the bleeping button is just going, I have to bleep out my bad language because my grandmother watches this show.
They kill Willis Lee when he takes a look at those ancient things.
I know.
His heart fails him.
Just down. I can't. Fucking Arkansas.
And then New York, the only major innovation over the Wyomings is that they've gone to the 14-inch guns. But we have designs for triple turrets at this point.
Yep.
And they don't. But then the next class they do.
Yep.
And then the Nevada class, it is really innovative with the all-or-nothing armor scheme. But they stop there with the innovation. They add 2 triple turrets.
Yeah.
They could have added those extra ones. They have 2 propellers still. They could have gone to 4, which the Pennsylvania class and all subsequent American battleships will. And Nevada finally tests out turbines on an American battleship.
There's a concept.
Generations later, Oklahoma still has reciprocating engines. So I think I'm leaning towards Oklahoma. And as innovative as the Nevada class was, introducing the new turbine system, which is not innovative at this point, introducing the all-or-nothing armor scheme, which is world-breaking and other people are late to adopt. Oklahoma just doesn't do any of that. You could have bypassed that class and gone straight to Pennsylvania.
And now people are roasting you. You picked the ship that was capsized that in Arizona for your least favorite. Oh my God! Cancel Ryan Szimanski. Okay. So we're on similar grounds when we talk about our least favorite U.S. battleships.
Yeah, I like the standard type. I do like the concept, but I do think we could have basically skipped every other class.
I think they're too similar, and there's not enough evolution there. And then I think for me, the icing on the cake is they're kept around far too long. It's not like a war spike in World War II,
where she was built with enough speed originally. And I kind of hate that because the Queen Elizabeth class, it's not homogenous like the American standard type. So it doesn't fit in with the regular battle line, but it's too slow to fit in with the battle cruisers. So the British now have like 3 or 4 different speeds. They're 21 knot battleships. They're 23 knot battleships. They're 25 knots. They're 28 knot battle cruisers. They're 30 knot battle cruisers. Whereas the U.S. has this, we have a 21 knot homogeneous battle line, and that's great. It should have been supplemented by some battle cruisers with it, which we
Lexington.
Yeah, I love the Lexington.
Which we finally get battle cruisers in 43, 44 when the Iowa class was launched. Oh man, I'm just like, I'm in a mood today.
You're going to have to call the English gentleman onto this show for future episodes. I'm not sure if I'm coming back.
The English gentleman. We can't say his name a third time. He'll manifest himself. Okay. Well, now that we've ruined our reputations on the internet, what is your least favorite battleship of any type, of any era, of any nation? Love to find out.
I am genuinely interested in reading what these responses are.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what people say. I mean, do you agree that a lot of those older U.S. battleships are not the greatest? I mean, just because they're flying a U.S. flag doesn't mean it's GP, gold plated. But there is service length and life and everything else. The fact that they were so brutalized at Pearl Harbor and for most of them to come back is, a testament. Or some of these other flimsy European battleships. Not
like Bismarck.
Flimsy.
Okay. That's the first word that comes to mind.
Yes. 40% armor. Okay. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had fun because I know this was fun for us. And we'll see you next month.
You're gonna